Pardon the interruption, but I'm Pablo Torre, and I'm starting a new podcast, Tony, but I am so excited that I still get to host PTI with you.
Tony Kornheiser, you've done this show before? Am I blanking on this? Do we know each other well?
We grilled
Where
the chicken together. I was at your house. I was in that room. I was the guy with the sign in the basement.
You're that one. So you're in Miami now. Are you beginning to sweat? Is that contagious? Does that go around like that? Welcome to PTI, boys and girls.
You automatically.
Wilbon has the day off, so I'm joined by our great friend who will not stop stumping for his new venture, Mr. Pablo Torre. Some long-distance clapping. And we begin today with the Jets introducing Aaron Rodgers as their new quarterback. Rodgers told the assembled media that the team's Super Bowl III trophy was looking a little lonely. He did not commit to playing past this season, and he said that one of the reasons the Packers might not have been able to reach him earlier this offseason was that his house has bad cell reception, and if you want to connect, you've got to use FaceTime. Pablo, what stuck out to you about what Rodgers said?
Oh, just the idea that Aaron Rodgers is trying to convince the New York media that he is worse at using his cell phone than you are, Tony. Somehow Aaron Rodgers is technologically illiterate in ways that are absolutely, just for the record here, implausible to the point of whether he is trying to insult our intelligence or whether this is all a troll. That's always the game, right? Are you trying to insult us by assuming that we'll fall for this, or are you just winking because it's so patently absurd? But the other thing I will add is that he was charming by and large. Tony, you know how easy it is to win over the hearts of reporters in an opening presser. You just say the first name. You say literally their first name back to them. And there was a lot of, oh, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Will. Like, hi. This is the honeymoon period. It's never going to be easier than it was today.
People should not confuse Aaron Rodgers' eccentricities with his intelligence. He's smart. Obviously, he can be charming. He thought about this for a long time. He is plotting. He is calculating. Yes. And he is driven. Okay, I know him enough to say that. The cell phone thing is utter nonsense, obviously. And he shouldn't try to sell that. He should just say, look, I was gone, and I didn't want to do anything else. So there's another thing he said, where he said, I'm not here to be a savior. No. You are here to be a savior. You are only here to be a savior, so a savior can rise from these streets. That's the only reason you're here. I'm glad he's not wearing 12, because in New York there's 112. There's name it, then he's doing the right thing. Let me just go on for a little while here. There is an unbridled optimism surrounding Aaron Rodgers right now in New York. He is the greatest get the Jets have gotten since Sonny Werblin signed. I'm not even talking about Super Bowl. Since he signed Joe Namath out of Alabama to an AFL team in like 1964 or 1965. But with that kind of optimism comes a very dark amount of pressure, okay? Because you are supposed to be immediately so much better. And Pablo, this is like, it's appropriate you're in Miami. This is like when LeBron James went to Miami. And he said into the microphone, not 5, not 6, not 7. Okay, well, they didn't get 5 or 6 or 7. They got 2, and 2 is fine. New York will sell its firstborn to get 1, which is exactly why Aaron Rodgers said that line about the Super Bowl trophy being lonely.
Yeah, Tony, the messianic aspect of this, what Rodgers, I think, does know, even though he postures otherwise, is the fact that you don't get to choose whether you're the Messiah or not. That is a democratically elected concept, and you have been nominated. You have won the nomination of the city of New York, the state of New York, for that role. And I'll also point out, the humor, the dark humor in all of this is also that Aaron Rodgers, this marriage with the Jets is something that both Jets fans want, and also something that the people who love to laugh at Jets fans want as well. They say in coaching and sports, you never want to do what your opponent wants you to do. A lot of people who hate the Jets also want this to happen, which is maybe a bit of context for the pressure here, underneath and absolutely everywhere in this story. But speaking of pressure, both the Timberwolves and the Clippers got eliminated last night, Tony, in the NBA. The more bad news we got to discuss, though, is that Kawhi Leonard was reportedly diagnosed with a torn meniscus in his right knee, totally destabilizing the Clippers now. Kawhi did not play in the last 3 games of the series after injuring the knee in Game 1. Paul George's knee, you'll recall his sprain, that kept him out of the whole series. So They wound up playing just 38 games together all season, Kawhi and Paul George. So what should the Clippers do after yet another disappointing finish?
What should they do? What can they do? They're mortgaged up to their eyeballs with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Paul George didn't play at all. They traded 1 million draft picks to get him. They don't have their own first-round pick till 2027. Kawhi Leonard, and I want to get the numbers right, Kawhi Leonard earned $45.6 million this year. He's got a player option next year, which I think he's going to say he wants, for $48.7 million. And now his knee seems to have gone from bad to
next
worse
year,
to
45,
even
then the
worse.
player option. Yeah,
He
Tony,
played
look.
50. He played 52 out of 82 games and 2 out of 5 in the playoffs. You cannot count on these guys. Pablo, they show clips of Steve Ballmer every time they make a basket, jumping up and down in his seat like some sort of crazed human being, a stuffed panda bear. You have to understand the difference between the roster and the reality. The reality of the Clippers is far less than the roster.
But the torture of this predicament, this catch-22, is that, yes, you're right, that these injuries are the biggest concern. Ballmer essentially admitted as much. He was asked what's been the worst part, and he said, in so many words, the fact that the human body is a frail, unreliable meat sack. Like, he has invested all of this money, his entire franchise, his multi-gazillion-dollar franchise, then a record price when he bought it, in 2 guys who have played less than half the games or thereabouts. And so, Tony, for me, the problem is that they are always hurt, but the bigger problem is that they're also easily the best thing that they can possibly hope for, if healthy. Like, the question is, if you get rid of Kawhi Leonard, you trade him to somewhere else. Why do you trade him? Because some other team will say, all I need him is healthy in the playoffs. And so the Clippers go as well. They played the Suns to a pretty close margin in this series, despite it being over, without those guys. If they get Kawhi healthy and Paul George healthy ahead of their new stadium being opened in 2024, 2025,
about?
It has to be the thing that they stick with. They don't have an option. They got to stick with them.
If this is like Zion Williamson, if he's healthy, I misspoke on the money. The $45 million plus is next year. The year after that is the player option. I just want to say this one thing. Phoenix won 4 in a row. And I know that the greater part of that was Kawhi Leonard not being able to play. But Devin Booker shot 47% from 3.
Excellent.
And Kevin Durant, who you didn't even notice, shot 52% from the field, and they combined for 65 points a game. So why would anybody pick the Clippers? And by anybody, I mean Wilbon and Kendrick Perkins, who sat on this show and laughed at me and mocked me, and who's laughing now? And we move on. Let's get to tonight's games. There are 3 road teams trying to close out series. New York at Cleveland, Lakers at Memphis, Miami at Milwaukee. And there's a game 5 in the most glamorous and tightly contested series so far, Golden State at Sacramento. So, Pablo, which matchup are you most interested in?
I'm interested in the Heat-Bucks game tonight, and that is with all of the caveats about how interesting I find everything else. But, Tony, you know the background. You can see the sweat pooling underneath me. I'm in Miami. I was at that game. I was there. I watched Jimmy Butler have a career high turn into the closest thing to, yes, Michael Jordan on the East Coast these days. Tony, I don't know. I don't expect Jimmy Butler to do what he did again tonight in Milwaukee this time. But what he did was validate every stupid cliche that people in this city like to say about how there's culture and the playoffs are different, and when the postseason, when the lights are brightest, our guy is the best thing. I saw it. I felt like I attended a cult meeting, and for that reason, I need to find out what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, if I was back writing a sports column and you asked me which is the most important and most interesting of these games, it would indeed be Miami at Milwaukee.
Yes.
Because if Miami can beat Milwaukee and knock them out of the series, that's the biggest upset on the board, and it changes the entire structure of the playoffs. It does. I don't think they can do it if Antetokounmpo is playing, but he played the other night and they did it. So, and I also didn't think that Boston was going to lose. I'll get to some of the other games, though, just on a personal level. I have not been paying much attention, you probably have, to New York and Cleveland, other than, to notice that Donovan Mitchell has been terrible in the series. Because Wilbon just shoves it down my throat about the Knicks, who I rooted for 50 years ago. 50 years ago, I had hair, so things change. The Golden State thing, You know, I've liked all of the games. It's not a closeout game. They're so terrible on the road. I think their record is 11-32. You wonder how they even got in the playoffs.
Horrible.
And I'll be very brief about the Lakers. I'd like to see the Lakers win because I actually don't like Memphis at this point. I mean,
Tony, the last thing I'll say is that Dylan Brooks feels at this point like an inside job by the NBA to make LeBron James more likable. He is so bad at being the villain to the point where it's only making LeBron look good.
Let's take a break. Coming up, is Bryce Young too small to be a star in the NFL? We're going to ask Booger McFarland.
We'll also ask him whether the Texans should prioritize Will Anderson over, a quarterback.
Yeah. So how's that Miami thing working out for you?
When your boss is Dan Le Batard, kind of gets weird with the 4 a.m. FaceTimes also. Him and Rodgers.
Yeah.
Why all the FaceTimes?
Yeah.
Why?
He should FaceTime Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has cell service on FaceTime somewhere in
I don't think that
Wisconsin,
network can hold all of that ego. I think you need a data.
Wilbon's not here, so let's dig into the NFL draft with a man who'll be analyzing it for ESPN, our great friend, Mr. Booger McFarland. Boog, let's start with this. The Carolina Panthers appear to be selecting Bryce Young with the #1 pick. You rushed passers for a living. Are you concerned, or should they be concerned, about Bryce Young's size?
No, I'm not, Tony. Now, if this were the NFL back when I played, sure, I'd be concerned because the quarterbacks were a lot bigger. But now the field is so spread, so much spread formation is being played. I need my quarterback to do a few things, and I need to do them well. I need him to deliver the football, process information, be a great decision maker. And Bryce Young does all those things at the highest level. Oh, by the way, he's only 5'10". That doesn't matter. There are ways that he's used his size to maneuver the pocket, step up, find throwing lanes. He's done that at the highest level in the SEC. So what makes me think he can't do it in the NFL? He's the best player in college football at the most important position. To me, it's a really simple pick.
But Booger, speaking of pass rushing, there's all this talk now, all of these smoke signals that the Texans might actually take Will Anderson out of Alabama, their star pass rusher at #2 overall. So given the way that the NFL obviously is now, all that importance on a quarterback, does that move make sense to you?
No, it doesn't, because if you don't have a quarterback, then you really have nothing. You're going to spend all your time looking for one. But I understand. If you look at D'Amico Ryans, the head coach there, they've given him a 6-year deal. So he's got a lot of runway to figure out how he wants to build his team. And if they've decided that the quarterbacks after Bryce Young don't fit what they do, then maybe he's going to pass on them. I wouldn't do it. I understand. And you're talking about somebody that loves defense. I love the guys that can get after the quarterback. But at the end of the day, the most important position is quarterback. And if you don't have one, you're searching for one. So if you're Houston, you better make sure that you're sure if you pass on a quarterback at #2.
So speaking of the players you love, I do want to know, who is your favorite player, period, of everybody in this draft?
Well, if I look in the mirror, it kind of reminds me of me. It's Kalijah Kancey, a defensive tackle, 6'1", 280 pounds. They say he's too small. They say he can't play in there amongst the trees. Well, here's what I know. I know he's the best 3 technique in this draft as far as rushing the passer, can make the inside move, can make the outside move. He is an athlete playing a big man's position. Similar to what they said I was a long time ago, 24 years ago in 1999. So if you're looking for a player that's kind of undersized, they said he can't do it, all he does is show up at the highest level and show you he can play. Yeah, he'll remind you a little bit of Aaron Donald, a little bit of Grady Jarrett, but I think he's going to be special at that position as far as rushing the passer. And we all know that's all they care about in the National Football League, who can rush the passer and who can throw the football.
We love the fact that you have insights into other players. But I'm going to get you out of here on you talking about you. When you were drafted, you were the 15th overall pick in the draft after a great career at LSU. And you went to Tampa Bay. Everybody knows that. I want to know what you think of the 14 teams that didn't pick you and what you think of the 14 players that went before you, because I know you can name them in order.
Well, those 14 teams all made a mistake, and those 14 players, even though 2 of them were Hall of Famers, probably didn't deserve to be picked. Listen, there were 5 quarterbacks that went before me in 1999, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a couple of corners. I can name them all, but we don't have enough time. I was the first defensive tackle pick.
Yeah, name them.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't have enough time to do that. I was the first defensive tackle picked in 1999. I take pride in that because after me came everyone else. So even though it was only at 15, maybe because Kuiper had me rated too low, I have no idea. Either way, I deserve to be in the top 5, but because of all the quarterbacks, I went 15, and I'll be happy with that.
You know and I know that you can name every single one of the people that went before you, which is easier than Tom Brady. You have to name 400 people, but we know you can do this.
Yeah, I can start the quarterbacks: Tim Couch, Achilles Smith, Donovan McNabb, Adrian James, Ricky Williams, Champ Bailey, John Tate, the tackle, Cade McNabb, Dante. I can go on and on. We don't have enough time for all that. I still have them memorized all this time later.
That's why we love you.
Now.
Thank you, Booger. Thank you, Booger.
Anytime, fella.
Thanks, Booger.
Anytime.
The first round starts tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Let's take one last break, but still to come, the Hawks stay alive against the Celtics. Will they have an edge at home in Game 6?
And Edmonton Oilers' Zach Hyman, Tony. He scores a goal with his face.
So I had Booger on my podcast this morning, and I asked him about this. He named every single player and went through why they weren't good enough to be picked over him. Now, he was happy to go to Tampa Bay, and he thought he was going to Tampa Bay, but I'm just telling you.
I'm shocked that you and Booger bonded over.
Happy time, people. Happy 31st birthday, Aaron Judge. Judge's 2022 season was one of the all-time greats. He was the MVP after batting .311, hitting 62 homers, and driving in 131 runs. It was the greatest home run performance ever by a Yankee, surpassing Babe Ruth's 60 and Roger Maris's 61. Judge played in 157 games. He hit 60 in his 143rd game, 61 in his 151st, and 62 in his 157th. After hitting 62, Judge sat out the final game of the season. Earlier in the year, Judge turned down the Yankees' offer of $213.5 million over 7 years to bet on himself. He won big, getting a 9-year, $360 million contract. So far this season, Judge is batting .244 with 6 homers and 11 RBI in 24 games.
Tony, look, the reality is that he's not going to hit 62 homers this year. I don't think there are examples in history of sports in general where you have a guy repeat or improve on that sort of record-setting campaign. But the good news is that today, on his birthday, he was 3 for 4, 2 doubles, 3 RBI, had a hand thing when he slid into third, but he's going to play through it. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for my guy.
Good. Happy anniversary, Tracy McGrady. Around this day 20 years ago, after Orlando took a 3-1 first-round lead over the Pistons, McGrady famously said, and I'm quoting here, "It feels good to get into the second round," unquote. Well, guess what? Pistons coach Rick Carlisle put Tayshaun Prince on McGrady. And McGrady, who had shot 51% through the first 4 games and had averaged 36 points, shot only 36% in the final 3 games, all of which the Pistons won by an average of 20 points. McGrady never made the second round of the playoffs in his career until 2013, when he was a bit player on the Spurs, averaging just 5 minutes a game.
Look, Tracy McGrady, obviously a flawed player when you compare him to others with Hall of Fame resumes, but what he was, Tony, beyond being a brief coworker of mine at ESPN, of ours, is that he is probably the guy with the best top 5 dunks, in-game dunks highlight reel that I can think of. He was so unbelievably fun to watch, and despite all of those flaws and limits on who he was as a player, he was maybe the most entertaining model of a swingman that I can remember watching, including, yes, Kobe Bryant and MJ. That dude, his tools, the fun of him, the ceiling was always so high.
Happy trails to the Celtics closing out the Hawks in Game 5. Atlanta is getting ready for Game 6 at home, thanks to Trae Young hitting a long 3 with 2 seconds left last night to beat Boston 119-117 in Boston. Young finished with 38 points, and then he said, quote, "I've been owning the moment my whole life. That's what I do," unquote. Young had led the Hawks back from 13 down with 6 minutes to play, personally scored Atlanta's last 14 points. Young has been a great playoff player. 36 in a closeout win over the Knicks, 35 and 39 in road wins over the Sixers, 48 on the road against Milwaukee, 38 to win a play-in game over Cleveland. Wilbon didn't think he'd be any good as a pro, and he has since eaten those words.
The stock chart on Trae Young, Tony, looks like an EKG. The original sin, of course, was that the Hawks took him instead of taking Luka Doncic, but then he becomes the guy who is shutting up the entirety of Madison Square Garden. And then before this postseason, there are rumors that, in fact, the Hawks want to trade him this offseason. And then he goes and becomes the guy that everybody hopes for, this public performer meeting the moment. I don't know what to do with him. I just know that I'm glad that he's not on my team and that I can watch him as he has all these peaks and valleys.
Couple of omissions quickly. Former Cy Young winner Robbie Ray of Seattle out for the season with a wrist injury, and the Cardinals send rookie Jordan Walker, who had started his career with a hit in 12 straight games, down to AAA. If we can get to the big finish, we got to move, kids. Paolo Banchero of the Magic won Rookie of the Year. Okay by you?
98 out of 100 first-place votes? Absolutely. The Commanders declined their fifth-year option, Tony, on Chase Young. You surprised?
I'm very surprised till I read that he's only got 1.5 sacks the last 2 years and only played in 12 games. He gets hurt. The Oilers beat the Kings 6-3. Is that a big deal?
Yes, they're up 3-2, and also Zach Hyman scored the goal with his face. Don't forget the face goal. Kraken and Avalanche tonight, elsewhere in the NHL. Who you got?
I find it funny to say Kraken on TV. Wilbon likes them. I got the other squad. Last one, the Astros snapped the Rays' 14-game home winning streak. Are you disappointed?
Yes, the 81-0 dream is dead.
We're out of time. We will try and do better the next time, and I'm Tony Kornheiser.
And I'm Pablo Torre. Thank you so much for watching PTI. We're off until Monday for the NFL Draft, but for now, your Sports Center and my sign.
Is that your stuff? Pablo, are you going to, like, take off your clothes and sit by the pool now? You're going to go sit by the pool?
I got big shorts energy down here, so.
Tremendous. That is tremendous.